Hello and welcome. I'm George Crump, lead analyst with Storage Switzerland. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about ransomware, and more specifically, we're going to give you sort of a checklist that you can build to make sure you're ready. One of the big things that we're concerned with is what we call technology, if you will, and the companies, if you will, behind ransomware just keep getting more sophisticated. And so knowing how to continue to improve your ability to defend, respond, and recover from those attacks becomes super critical. Joining me in the conversation, I've invited Carla Federico. She is the Director of Marketing at Infrascale. Carla, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So, Carla, before we get too far into the presentation, can you give the folks just a quick background on yourself and on Infrascale?
Yes. So I'm the Director of Marketing at Infrascale, as you mentioned, and I've been with Infrascale for nearly 6 years. Infrascale was founded in 2012. Our headquarters is in Los Angeles, and we're focused on disaster recovery as a service and ransomware.
Okay. And then for those that don't know me, I'm George Crump. I'm the founder and lead analyst at Storage Switzerland. I've been doing that for about 12 years. Prior to that, I was CTO at a large storage integrator and did a lot of work designing disaster recovery solutions for data centers all across the United States. And honestly, Carla, I wish back then I had disaster recovery as a service because, man, it would have made my life a lot easier than it was back then. So I tell people now, man, back in 1995, we had to walk uphill both ways in the snow to do a DR plan. So the DRAS has really made things a lot better. But let's obviously today we're going to be focusing in on ransomware. And Carla, as you know, I like to kind of always sort of level set and talk about this. And I want to kind of really get some of your insights too, because you guys are, probably more than on the front lines. You're like behind enemy lines kind of when it comes to this thing. So first of all, ransomware is malware. At a very simple level, it essentially goes through and encrypts an organization's data, except of course it doesn't tell you what the encryption key is. And what I see typically is there's two solutions to it. One, you either pay the ransom or two, you somehow figure out a way to recover data. Now, as you kind of look at what you guys see from all your customers, I'm assuming you're seeing just a massive increase in ransomware attacks even within your customer base. Is that true?
We are, and we also have a number of outreach, after the ransomware attack happened. And so, we're going to talk about this, of course, during the presentation, but, it really takes that planning and preparation ahead of time. After the ransomware has already sunk in, what we see is, they'll try to pay the ransom, and then even after paying that, sometimes they still don't get their data back. So it's definitely a growing problem, like you said, just getting larger and larger.
Yeah, that's a really good point that I don't think we talk about very often, that just because you pay the ransom, there's no guarantee that they're actually going to, these are not like, these are not people that are registered at the Better Business Bureau, right? So, you can't rate them on Yelp or anything. So there's no guarantees you're getting your data back, right?
Not at all. And in most cases, what we see is about in half of the cases, they pay the ransom and don't get the data back. And then they'll reach out to us. So, then they'll say, okay, well, we need a solution. So that's what we do. Yep.
Yeah. Ouch. That's because, as I used to say, that's going to leave a mark, right? And so let's talk a little bit about sort of what we're seeing as the next wave. I think the big one that I see, Carla, is, and I don't have a great, but I call it kind of gradual infection, where in the old days, 3 years ago, ransomware would be dropped in and it would just go to work, and as fast as it can, it would try to encrypt, a couple 100,000 files. We're starting to see now where they just drop in and just encrypt a little bit of data at a time, and that kind of makes them harder to detect. Do you guys see that as well?
Yeah, well, and we also we know that the technology for ransomware is getting smarter and smarter, just like any other type of technology, right? There's going to be advancements in any type of tech, and these are advancements in ransomware, right? You can easily go online and buy a ransomware package yourself for about $35. So, your neighbor or your brother, anyone has access to it. That's what makes it tough too, is that anyone can get their hands on it.
Wow, I think if your brother's buying ransomware package and using it against you, you got some real family issues you need to address there.
Maybe that was a bad example of your brother.
Ow. Okay, so sorry, I should have let that one go, I guess. But anyway, so the other thing is that we're seeing is sort of this concept of what we call backup corruption, where, again, the executable can sit there for days, weeks, months, and that lets the backup get, essentially, it's backing up the executable, and then restoration essentially restores the infected executable. So that really brings in the concept of lots of versions of data and files, and be able to pick and choose from those different versions, right?
Yeah, it kind of plays to that idea of, ransomware is getting smarter. We need to be getting smarter too. So we need to try. We're kind of always on its heels, right? And we want to try to get ahead of it instead. So it's a constant battle. Yeah,
exactly. And I think the key thing is that we see, and I purposely didn't put any of the super scary slides in here, but I mean, we are talking now about and I use the word industry in quotes, but or air quotes, but we're really talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry nowadays. I think I've seen, some experts kind of pin this in the $11 billion range. So there's clearly money going into this industry, so to speak, and I think that's why we're seeing these advancements, right?
Yeah, and so when we see those figures on the industry as well, these are the stories that we hear in the news or see in the news is, large hospitals that are attacked by ransomware, large enterprises, well-known companies, but those stories that we hear don't cover all of the ransomware cases, right? Think about all of the cases that we don't see and don't hear about. So those figures for the industry, I believe, are actually much lower than reality. It's just a much larger figure than that because of everything that we don't.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you there. I think I got into an argument with somebody. I know that's hard for you to imagine that actually happened, but I got an argument with somebody, and because they had said that ransomware is specifically going after government agencies and healthcare organizations and stuff like that. I said, no, I don't think they're that specific. I think they go after, the only reason you see that in the news more often is because most of the time, most of those industries are forced to report the attack.
Yes.
Like Joe's Plumbing, Joe's Plumbing doesn't have to admit that he got attacked, right?
Right. And they'll keep that to themselves as much as possible.
I wouldn't tell anybody. So and then the final area, just sort of the same thing, is we see a growing case of, if you will, backup and snapshot specific attacks, right? Where the ransomware specifically targets a backup, it encrypts the backup configuration files, and encrypts protected data. So again, that versioning comes in, making sure you can limit who has access, what services and what users, if you will, have access to the backup process becomes important, and just protecting the backed up data itself. All of that really factors into that. So let's talk, Carl, a little bit about some of the recovery challenges. And for me, the kind of interesting thing that became a realization for me kind of early on as this whole ransomware thing started to go was, this is, most disasters, if you can recover someday, you might get in trouble, but at least you were able to recover. This is, you've got sort of like a clock running against you. You talked about people paying the ransom, and and only getting it back 50% of the time. But there is this thing, as an IT professional, there is this thing hanging over your head that, okay, I can go through all this work to recover 100,000 files, or I could just pay the ransom and see what happens. And so you've actually got to be better at recovery than you used to be, because now you've got this, if you almost like build-in competition compared to, like, if your data center gets flooded, there is no other option, right? You have to recover, and there's not like somebody else that can get the data back faster. Here, paying the ransom could be a faster option. That really becomes a pressure point for IT, right?
Yeah, and one of the key points that you have on this slide here that's up on the screen is that the infection can occur anywhere, even laptops, desktops, and those endpoints. You know, it's happening on tablets and smartphones as well. So it's broadening its reach, which makes it so difficult to counterattack as well.
Yeah, and I think that's especially important when we start talking about laptops, desktops, endpoints. Is so much unique data? It lives on those things nowadays that, and we have all as humans become so dependent on a laptop or a desktop that you can't, you know, like I don't ever leave my house anymore without my laptop at least stuck in the back pocket of my car just in case, right? And so those are, if you will, for lack of a better word, those are mission critical things to the organization nowadays, right?
Yes. The rise of BYOD, bring your own device. Everyone has sort of commingled their personal data and their work data. They're using personal devices to get work done, and that makes it so critical to protect the data on those devices. And it's really what most organizations are leaving exposed. You know, first and foremost, they'll protect their servers, mission critical apps, and workstations. But then, generally speaking, endpoints get left exposed, and they're not properly or adequately protected. So that's why they're so susceptible to ransomware as well, and that's why it becomes such a challenge for recovery there when it comes to endpoints.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing there is, you know, you see stuff like Microsoft's new initiative. I think they call it Always Connected or something like that. Where, I mean, now, you know, I don't want to name a name, but our project management software about 3 months ago went down. And it's a software as a service thing, and we literally had no idea what we were supposed to do next because it was all in our project management software. I mean, our dependency on connectivity and the amount we're connected is so critical nowadays. I think the other important thing is, you know, make sure you don't recover the trigger. And I talked about this a little bit earlier. You've got to be very careful. I've seen this happen a few times. You can create this endless loop of corruption where you can restore the file zero, so to speak, and that really causes a challenge. So again, versioning becomes important there, and being able to identify sort of that trigger file. All of that becomes really important.
Exactly. Yep. I think we'll talk about that a little bit more down the line as well here.
Absolutely. So I think let's talk about, you know, I like to just break things down real simple. So I think there's 3 real key steps to beating ransomware, right? The number one thing is you have to defend. Now, what I did kind of leave out of this because it would have messed up my 3 steps is there is some things you can do from a perimeter perspective to defend yourself, and I'm not, you know, making light of that, certainly. But I think you also have to live in a world where this is going to get through, right? That no matter how well you train your users and all the things that you can do, you have to also prepare for the day that it eventually gets through, right? And so I think the first thing is, the first 2 bullets are kind of tied together, is the ability to do granular and change-only type of backups. And there's a lot of different, every company has sort of their own term for that, but the ability to get at very granular backups. And the reason that's important is this concept of frequent protection, so that, again, going back to kind of what we had mentioned on the last slide was, you know, that this can infect anywhere at any time. And so getting frequent protection really becomes very critical. As I recall, Carla, in a prior webinar we had done, you guys recommend a pretty frequent backup to your customers as well, right?
We do. We recommend 15-minute increments.
Maybe that's where I got it from. I don't know. So it's, it's short. But that, and if you think about it, in 15 minutes, losing 15 minutes of data for most, most companies and most of their data set is certainly not the end of the world, right? It's almost a non-event at that point. So I think those are really critical. I think the other thing, we talked about this, the concept of protecting everything. You can't leave, I can remember for literally decades trying to talk people into backing up laptops. And this really is the quintessential reason, right, that these devices, obviously, as we talked about, are critical, especially to the users using them. And then secondly, they are prime targets. You open one of these up in a Starbucks or wherever, these are prime targets. They're sort of the most exposed, if you will, of everything. And so critical to get those protected, right?
Exactly. And to your point about losing 15 minutes of data, that's a great point. It's usually not the data in and of itself that's so expensive or so costly to that organization, but it's the cost of the downtime associated with the ransomware attack. It's when it puts an end to production, essentially. So that 15 minutes ends up being inconsequential. So that's just a really good point that you made. I really liked how you brought that in.
Yep, thank you. So I think that those really become important. And I don't really mention it here on the slide, but I think one of the things that makes me nervous in just data protection generally is that there's a sort of sprawl of applications. Like, okay, I'm going to use this to protect my Microsoft SQL, I'm going to use this to protect my virtual environment, I'm going to use this to protect my file servers, and this to protect my endpoints. And all of a sudden, you talked about recovery complexity just a second ago, Carla, having to interface with, 3 or 4 different data protection applications and potentially 3 or 4 different clouds. Man, that's going to make, if you get hit by ransomware and it could easily hit all 3 of those examples there. That's going to make recovery very difficult if you got to interface with 3 different applications to put everything back together, right?
Yes, we definitely come across that all the time. Data sprawl is a constant problem. Just ensuring that everything is protected, right? So we do a lot of research when we get on webinars and events and things like this, running polls with prospective customers and just seeing what is the largest problem that you're facing, with recovery today and with data protection, and data sprawl comes up, time and again. So it is important to be able to have a solution that can work across, servers, applications, endpoints, and workstations, so that you don't have that mishmash of 4 to 5, maybe 6 different solutions that you're trying to get a hold of. Like you said, it becomes really complicated and very difficult to try to recover that way. So just having one solution that can cover everything, it becomes more and more critical.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think the other key point there is to protect the backup data itself. Make sure it's off-site. I think that's a natural advantage that the cloud has. Try to limit access to the backup software itself, limit the amount of super users you create and things like that. And then, use things like dual factor authentication and different things like that to make sure that you've got that data well protected. So let's talk about step 2, and that's really a detection system. And I think, again, there's a lot of ways to get there. There's some third-party software you could install that will do some things, but it almost innately, the backup system should be able to alert. And I know that you're going to get into some anomaly detection capabilities that you guys have at InfraScale, but very simply, what we're looking for is a high number of changes to files, right? And in some cases, actual file name changes as well. So, but this concept of detecting is really critical. I think it ties in well with that 15-minute granular backup that we talked about, if you can detect quickly and you're backing up 15 minutes, you can really limit your exposure from a ransomware attack, right?
Yes, exactly. And so you want to make sure when you're looking at solutions and whatnot that some may say, okay, well, we can try to remediate the effects of a ransomware attack, but you also want that detection capability, not just one or the other. You need to have both, because if you're not able to detect where that point in time, where that ransomware infection occurred, then you're not going to be able to roll back properly. You'll end up in that case that you brought up earlier of, maybe you're recovering that malicious file as well. So you want to be able to not only have unlimited versioning, but then also be able to detect when that ransomware came into play and then remediate from there for that recovery.
Yeah,
and you
exactly.
Have it here. It should provide multiple versions. Yep, you've got it right here on this slide as well.
Yeah, and I think that you had mentioned the word limitless versions, right? I think that's important too. I think you can't, especially as we see these strains, for lack of a better word, that can encrypt a little bit, go away, encrypt a little bit, go away. Keeping those versions and being able to pinpoint when it happened, what was affected, I think really is critical in building the defense strategy that you need going forward.
Exactly.
So let's talk about, and obviously at some point we're going to have to actually recover something, right? So the first two really are, let's get it protected, let's know when something bad has happened, and then the real test is, can you recover, right? And again, I go back to, you sort of got this clock going against you that you don't have in other disasters, right? That there is this, it may not be very comfortable, but there is this option of paying the ransom. And so I think, the first thing is multiple recovery methods need to be available, right? If you can catch it early, having the ability to recover from a local copy is really advantageous. If you get really struck fast and having a remote copy that you can access is also critical. So having these different methods are really important. And even in kind of the type of recovery, so the second thing I have there is sort of if we can, especially with detection, like we talked about on the last slide, there is a possibility that I could detect this and, let's say only 100 files are changed. So that the concept of being able to recover just a single file is super critical. And I point that out because there are some solutions out there that don't really give you that capability. That they're essentially only able to recover an image, or the time frame to extract a single file is very slow. So something to be very, very critical. The other concept is sort of this versioned recovery, so to be able to recover different versions of files from within different versions of backup. And then the other thing I kind of put here is, kind of this concept of boot from backup. You'll hear a lot of marketing terms for it, but essentially the idea of recovering from the source, and that's really sort of one of the key building blocks for disaster recovery as a service, right, Carla?
Exactly. You want that flexibility in a solution, right? So to recover locally or on-prem, or to recover to the cloud and sort of cloud boot, a virtual instance. So yeah, it is very critical.
Yeah, and I think that cloud instance is important. It's like I have there on the slide when the entire data center is compromised, and I think it's, we don't know what's next in these things, and there could very easily be, there's been rumors, I should say, of a strain that can get into, let's say, major name brand storage solutions and, compromise those, and then just go delete entire volumes, right? Well, if that happens, then, you've got a real big problem on your hands. So the ability to move to another location, and a cloud being an ideal one, is really going to be critical, especially I think as these things continue to advance. What do you think?
Yep, I completely agree.
And I think to me, this is one of the best values of the cloud, right? That you can, if you look at and we've got it in the links, but there's some other webinars we've done with Carla where we talk about just DRaaS as a disaster recovery as a service as sort of just the key focus. And if you look at it, I mean, if you look at the cost of recovering and having a disaster recovery site and, you know, equipping that disaster recovery site and shipping gear in and all the things you have to do that, you know, like I said, when we used to have to walk uphill both ways in the snow, versus having a DRaaS. DRaaS is almost just the perfect cloud relationship because it's you're renting it essentially, and you only need it when you need it. It's just an ideal scenario. So I'm sure that good.
Yeah, well, the value of the cloud as well is you don't have those excessive hardware costs, right? You eliminate those hardware costs by having that cloud access, right? And that's where it becomes an affordable solution as well. So I think in the past, the sort of traditional trade-offs between recovery time and cost were just that it was far too expensive a solution. But now it's an affordable solution, and that's why, you know, more and more people are paying attention to that and realizing that that's the best way to go.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I was right. If you click on the attachment section, actually the second link is a link on disaster recovery as a service, so you can get more information there. But stay here until we get done. So let's talk about sort of our checklist here quickly. I didn't want to lose everybody. So let's talk about our checklist. And to be very honest with you, Carl, I sort of stole this from your guys' site, so don't tell anybody in marketing or anything. So I think number one is user education. And I'm always nervous actually when I say user education because I feel like, but we all know it's not going to work, but you still got to do it. And so, you know, I mean, and that's, you know, I'm kind of being somewhat oversimplified there, but, you know, essentially teach them not to click on anything with a link, you know, don't go to websites they don't understand, and just keep repeating it. I'll tell you the number one mistake I see in education when I'm talking, you know, a lot of times post-mortem to somebody that's got a ransomware attack is they did it once, like at the beginning of the year, and you just got to realize that that's just not going to stick that long. You got to keep reminding them almost every day that, hey, don't do this, right?
Yeah, they're even
good.
Well, and lots of companies as well that will not only do you provide the education, but then you also test essentially the end users that have been trained, you know, to constantly make sure that you're kind of running tests as well and ensuring that what has been educated sticks. So that's another point too.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, there's some things you can do around email security, I think, and this is sort of obviously nothing that either certainly Storage Switzerland or Infrascale really does, but just, you know, in the effort of helping you guys, you're looking for a software that can do reputation authentication, anti-spam, anti-malware stuff. I mean, there are strains that are detectable. There are also strains that aren't detectable, so I want to put that in as a caveat. But you might as well get what you can as quickly as you can. So there's also anti-phishing components as well. So I think that anything on email security that I'm missing there, Carla?
Nope, this is great, right? You want to try to catch it before it takes root in your systems. You know, keep software up to date, enable auto updates, auto protect, you know, personal firewall features as well. Just having all that protection in the background.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously there's also gateway security, a lot of the same things there. You want to make sure you can look for persistent threats and essentially all the above. Most of that stuff maps right through there. I think there's also some role for file monitoring. You know, we're building it into backup systems now, which is really good. I would like to see, frankly, I think this has to be an operating system thing that can start to look for, rapid and frequent opens, a lot of modifications, a lot of closures, file renames. And there are some third-party tools that can do that to keep an eye out for, but we're personally pushing the operating system vendors to start building this stuff into their, especially Microsoft, to build this into their code itself. We talked at length about frequent backups. And again, I think that 15 minutes is really kind of a magic number, right? That getting it done in 15 minutes is really important. And at the same time, the one slide a while back, Carla, we had this concept of push button recovery. And I don't want to steal your thunder because I know that you guys really addressed that well. But this concept of recovering in 15 minutes and doing it very, very quickly, that's really important, right?
Of course it is. And it comes back to that idea of the cost of downtime if you don't have something like that in place. And we recommend 15 minutes to minimize the amount of damage that's done, right? But like we were saying, 15 minutes of data loss in comparison to, tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars in a ransomware request and then not even getting that data back. It's kind of a no-brainer when you look at it that way and try to balance the scale that way.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think the other one is sort of this concept of a cloud copy, right? At a bare minimum, and I mean bare minimum, just to have a protected copy of data in the cloud is really, really helpful. The other is, that we talked about a little bit, is disaster recovery as a service. There is, I meant to put in the attachments. I'll do it afterwards if people want to come back in. On the user education thing, sometimes a daily scare is good. And so there's a site called databreaches.net, which I don't think is really affiliated with anybody. And it literally on a daily basis will list kind of the latest breaches, and not every one is a ransomware breach. A lot of other companies, well, there's a lot of reasons people get hacked and all that kinds of. This has all of them, but if you scroll through there, you can't go a week without seeing 2 or 3 ransomware attacks noticed. And as Carl and I discussed, that's only the top of the iceberg, right? That most people don't report. So, Carla, with all that out of the way, why don't I give it over to you, and you can kind of, in 15 minutes, talk about a 15-minute failover guarantee.
Yeah, perfect. Sounds good. And thanks for all that really valuable information that we've looked at so far on your end. And what I want to do essentially is just introduce a little bit more about the infrascale technology in specific, how we can mitigate the damages from ransomware, how we do disaster recovery as a service, right? Just sort of a basic overview there. So just want to start by sharing with everyone our 15-minute failover guarantee. And we use that word guarantee, and we're very serious about that. We don't see any solutions in the industry today that can offer this type of guarantee. We haven't really seen anything close. We were named the best ransomware solution by Redmond Channel Partners, so we have that little badge here that you guys can see. But I also wanted to share that we were named a leader in the Disaster Recovery as a Service Magic Quadrant by Gartner in 2017. So that's their most recent release of their DRAS Magic Quadrant, and we were a leader just right behind IBM and SunGard. We were third essentially on that list. And so our solution has been verified and vetted by the experts. So I just wanted to share that before we kind of dive into the details. And so when we just talked about the checklist, right, for ransomware mitigation. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this at all. I just sort of took the 7 points and boiled them down to 3. But really it's what we just looked at, that there's no single end-all, be-all solution for ransomware. It requires a comprehensive approach. And so you do want that end-user education, that anti-malware, antivirus. And then what I'm going to talk about specifically is this, backup and disaster recovery portion, right? So you want to have a really strong backup of that data. You want it to be able to roll back to a date before the ransomware hit. So you need that file history, that versioning capability that we were talking about, and you want to have that built into the solution. So you do not want to get stuck with a backup solution in place that doesn't keep versions of your file. It's really going to be no use to you when it actually comes time to recover, right? So you want to have a backup of your data and your systems, not just files and folders on your individual machine. So like we discussed, we now know ransomware is going to work itself through your network. It spreads like wildfire to the entire organization. So you really need to have protection on the data and systems. So what I wanted to share, we essentially went a step further with simple backup and recovery. We created this anomaly detection technology, which is monitoring all of the backup activity, and it's looking at patterns of data changing. So we're going to release an alert when it's detected that ransomware might be present. So essentially what we're doing with this technology is that we can proactively see the threat of data encryption by these hackers before the ransom's ever posted or demanded. So what we're looking at here is essentially this is within our dashboard, and the InfraScale dashboard is simply, it can be accessed by any browser where you can log in, see all of the backup activity, and you can set a threshold here. And then on the right, you see where that spike is detected and that anomaly is detected, and that's when the alert is going to be released. So within our dashboard, you have access to all the reporting and monitoring, of course. You have access to all the versioning, and then you're able to set controls for orchestration as well when it comes to a failover. So you have those orchestration policies built in advance, and that way, and anytime a disaster strikes, you're able to fail over within that 15 minutes or less. So how we do this is essentially with these three solutions that are all part of our dashboard, part of our solution that really provides that comprehensive data and system recovery. So with InfraScale Cloud Backup, which is a direct-to-cloud solution oriented around data backup, typically for that endpoint data protection that we were talking about earlier, those laptops, tablets, mobile devices. And then we also have cloud application backup, and this is focused on those cloud workloads, O365, SharePoint, G Suite. So you can recover individual items there, or you can recover entire mailboxes. And this is really critical because most cloud applications, they have limited retention policies. So maybe 30 days of retention, and then everything's deleted forever. So then third is the InfraScale Disaster Recovery solution. It's a hybrid solution. It includes an on-prem component as well as the cloud. So with our DR solution, of course, you can back up your data, but it goes a step further than that. And so it's capturing full system images and then allowing you to boot and run those images either on a local appliance or in the cloud, just depending on the type of disaster and what you need. So with that, we've sort of already done all the work behind the scenes ahead of time to prepare those images and then ensure that those images are able to run in the cloud, even though they were originally installed and running on a local physical server. So we'll just kind of quickly look at the specifics. We just want to look at everything that we do, what we can support, right? So we protect any device, desktops, laptops across Windows and Mac, mobile devices, iPhones, Androids, including some MDM functionality built in as well. So mobile device management, we have geolocate, remote wipe as well. So this includes servers, physical and virtual servers. So we support physical servers running Windows, Unix, Linux, virtual servers on KVM, Hyper-V, KVM. I said KVM, VMware, right? VMware, Hyper-V, and KVM. And then we support more than 100 versions of operating systems. So this is really the broadest support footprint that you can find in the industry today. So that's what's so critical here and why I bring this up. And then as far as recovery targets, this is really critical as well. So we support any cloud or a prepackaged appliance. So you can use one of InfraScale's 15 global data centers. So we have 15 data centers worldwide. You can use your own private cloud or a third-party cloud. Our software is going to run with Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Azure, IBM. And then just a recap essentially of who we are as a company, a little bit about the overview of what we do, and then how our solution's been verified. So we're essentially using intelligent software. We have built-in global deduplication, compression, and WAN acceleration technologies. So what we've done is, which we sort of talked about earlier, is eliminated the expensive hardware add-ons. So you can instead bolt on unlimited amount of cloud space for long-term storage as well. We use intelligent cloud spillover, and what we have in this approach is essentially it's been gaining a lot of momentum and gaining attention. So I mentioned just a moment ago that we were a Gartner leader in the DRaaS Magic Quadrant. Well, we started in 2015 as a cool vendor with Gartner, and then in 2016 we were a visionary in disaster recovery. And then 2017, we moved to that leader quadrant. So we're really gaining a lot of momentum there. And then as far as just who we are and what we do, I mentioned at the very, very beginning of the webcast, we were founded in 2012, but we are headquartered in Los Angeles. We have about 1,000 partners worldwide. In turn, we are currently active in over 170 different countries. So it's actually 172 at the moment, I believe, where we're protecting businesses in 172 countries. So in turn, I actually do need to update this one. I have 100 petabytes of protected data here, but that figure is actually over 600 petabytes of data that we're protecting. So I'll have to correct that typo for our next webcast. So definitely, keep your eyes peeled for, the upcoming 2018 and 2019 figures and research there. But our solution has been essentially vetted by the experts. So with that, I just wanted to give, that quick, like you said, 10-minute, 15-minute recap of our company and our solution. And I think we could maybe dive into some questions and see if there is anyone on the line who is interested in hearing a little bit more, or perhaps would like to have a demo of the solution. We can definitely do a one-on-one demo for you. You can see that anomaly detection technology in action, see our orchestration in action as well, and view a cloud boot. Or if anyone is interested in an evaluation of the solution, I'm definitely happy to get you set up with that as well.
Okay, thanks, Carla. Appreciate that. So yeah, like Carla mentioned, we've got some time now for Q&A. So if you want to ask a question, there's a Ask the Question button. You can click on that, type in your question, and we will be glad to answer it for you. Also, just wanted to point out again the attachments and links section. So you click on attachments, you'll see a couple of other webinars that we have that are similar, that are on similar subjects, so you can go deeper. And then there's a really good, I think, PDF from that the folks at Infrascale did on a survival guide that is really good. As I said, I'm at least admitting that I stole the checklist from there. So, and then we have a couple other articles and blogs that we've written. So feel free to peruse through those and take a look at them. The other thing I want to do is point out that the webinar will be available on demand, probably within 5 to 10 minutes when we're done today. There's a link in the upper right-hand corner of your player. You can email this to somebody and a colleague or a friend if you think they might have find the information to be valuable. So I'm sure they'd rather get an email from you than from me. So go ahead and do that if you would. So Carla, you ready for a few questions?
Sure, sounds great.
Okay. Well, I want to take one that came in just because it's kind of an interesting thing. So I had mentioned how frequently these happen. So I had to go all the way back to June 26th. So if you're watching this on demand, we're recording this webinar on June 28th. So I had to go 2 whole days to find a ransomware attack notification. It looks like a little retail outlet store got hit, and they had to buy 0.6 Bitcoin, which is probably about $5,000 or so, given I don't know what Bitcoin's trading for nowadays. So it gives you an example, right? That this stuff is real. I think the other thing that I always find interesting about ransomware is much of the time these guys are not dumb, right? The ransomware fee, like it's not like they charge, like if these guys would have been hit with like $1 million ransom, they would have said, no, we're just not going to do that. But it's enough to make you think about it, right? And so that's a real interesting attribute of these guys that just kind of shows that they've sort of thought these things through. Let's see. The other one that came up that, let me throw this one to you. I think it's right about the anomaly detection. How do you provide an alert when anomaly is detected?
Yes, yeah, that's a great question. So it's an email alert, and that is going to go straight to the administrator. So that email is going to pop into the admin's inbox, and that's going to come directly from the dashboard. So
okay.
It is a very straightforward process, right? You set the threshold. As soon as that spike in data change is detected, then an alert's going to be sent out via email.
Okay. Another question came in that I'll go ahead and take is, you spoke about endpoints, any known attacks of Android or iOS devices. Well, honestly, you could Google it and hit almost anything you want, but there has been several reports of both Google and Apple having to report that they've removed ransomware apps that had ransomware capabilities, I guess you would put it, in the app. And so both companies are suspect, I guess, to some extent. And it's an ongoing thing. You could do a Google search on it and get a lot of hits. So, Carl, I think that just reemphasizes the importance of not only laptop protection, but also devices themselves, right?
Exactly. Going back to what we've been talking about, it's any data essentially that a company has is susceptible, right? It really doesn't matter anymore where that data is stored or kept, or if it's an endpoint, or if it's a workstation, or if it's a server. It's going to span across all types of devices that you do need protection for all the data and systems.
Yeah, exactly. So let me also put up the contact information for the two companies. So if you need more information, you can get it there. Carla, this isn't an official question, but you had mentioned the ability to have a demo done for them. What's the process? Is there like a form on the website or something they sign up for?
So you could just, as easy as just using the Q&A here within the presentation, and just let us know, and we'll be happy to get you set up with that. But also at infoscale.com, up in the top right corner as well. If you're watching this on demand and you don't have access to the Q&A, then you're able to do that there too. So very easy process.
Okay, great. Yeah, and so if you are watching on demand, just go to the Infoscale website and upper right-hand corner, I think is what you said, right?
Yep.
Let's see. The next one is where are the Infoscale data centers located?
Yep. So yeah, that is a great question. I did mention that we had 15 worldwide data centers, but hadn't brought up where exactly they are. So I know that data sovereignty issues come into play, and where that data is stored can become really critical, especially when it comes to different compliance issues and regulations and such. So we have data centers within the U.S., within Canada, South America, the UK, and Europe. We have data centers in South Africa and Asia. So we sort of cover all the bases when it comes to that, and you're able to request specifically which data center you might need to use if those data sovereignty issues are coming into play. Or, for example, if it's a Canadian company that needs the data to stay in Canada, for example, we have a data center in Toronto that we use there. So we do have kind of all the bases covered when it comes to that.
Okay. We've probably got time. We're running a little over. We've probably got time for one more question. So I guess probably the big one here that I see, Carla, is what's the infrascale pricing like?
Yes, that is a great question as well. So our pricing is simply based on the amount of data that you have to protect. So there are not going to be any add-on fees for any type of support. There are going to be no add-on fees for maintenance or upgrades. Everything is going to be included in that subscription model. So it's a low monthly cost, and it really is an as-a-service solution, right? Everything else is going to be included. But it's based on the amount of data that you have to protect, just the number of terabytes. So we are able to do, a quick and easy sort of sizing exercise with you to determine how much data there is to protect in it, and then that subscription is based off of that.
Okay. So that really brings us to the we're out of time. Again, I want to let you know that the contact information is there. If you're watching on demand, which a lot of people do, feel free to reach out to us at one of those methods. Be glad to talk to you directly or answer any questions you might have. So Carla, thanks very much for joining us on the webcast today.
Thank you for having me. This was great. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in. And again, remember to invite a friend if you found this information useful by using the email button up in the upper right-hand corner. For now, though, I am George Crump, lead analyst with Storage Switzerland. Thank you for joining us today.